I wound up spending from 64 to about 71 working full-time or part-time as a recreation aide or activity therapy aide, and working mostly with the younger children. It was Fort Wayne State Hospital, and the experience is a lot different in retrospect than it was when it was being lived. When it was being lived, it just was what it was, and I didn't know a lot that I know now. And I can say that while at the time I had a lot of fun, and the kids that I was working with, and then eventually adults that I was working with, mostly had a lot of fun when we were together. Maybe mostly. But in fact, overall, it was pretty miserable for the folks that lived there. And today, it's one of the things that I try not to think about too much because it makes me too sad to think about the things that I was part of and saw there, the mistreatment, people encouraged to mistreat each other. To go into much detail is a little scary because of some of it's just too hard to do, but the head of security was an abusive person, and I watched him abuse people. And I remember a guy, great big guy, who was physically in mostly pretty good shape. And his name was Paul, and he liked me because my name was Paul, and he was always, "Hey, Big Paul!" But then I watched that security guard, or the head of the security for the institution, would be in a canteen or something, and he'd come up to him and, supposedly being friendly and whatnot, would start punching him. And there's nothing I could do about it. At the time, even at that time, in that milieu, when most people didn't think much of that, it upset me a lot, but there was nothing I could do about it. They segregated the people with Down syndrome for no reason that I can understand. It's also interesting that there was considerable difference, I think, between what went on in different institutions. One thing that I don't think ever happened at Fort Wayne that did happen at Muscatatuck, some of the staff sort of semi-adopted some of the residents and would take them to their family events, take them out for Christmas, and take them home with them on various times. And they became a little bit more like us, at least to those individual staff that did that. And I don't know of anybody doing that in Fort Wayne. There were a lot of really, at the same time, in terms of staff, there were a lot of really wonderful people, really good, sweet people participating in an absolutely horrible milieu. And it only takes later advances to be able to look back and see how bad it was. The abusive nature of it was not unlike, in many ways, not unlike prisons today. And I think, looking back on it, without thinking about it and without describing it or I can't find quite the right word, without articulating it, people were operating under the assumption that there was a separation in terms of quality of humanity or even humanity between the people who were incarcerated and the staff. Essentially, everybody operated on the assumption that the people that lived there were subhuman. If you had challenged them on that, they would have been upset. But if you looked at how they interacted with people, then it was continuous. There's a building that should have been preserved there. It was called Cedar Cottage. And that one had cells in the basement with chains in the walls and things carved in the walls from people that have been incarcerated there over the years. While some activities in the institution were done in a fairly open, free kind of way. I mean, we had football games and baseball games and that sort of thing, and we had summer camp. But much of the daily living stuff outside of that, the getting up and going to bed and eating and bathing and all of that, was handled very much the same way as it's done in prisons today. It was very regimented, and it really depended on the emotion of the staff person at the moment on how individuals and groups of individuals were treated. It's that old story of, you know, if mama has a bad day, everybody has a bad day. Well, if the attendant had a bad day, whoever came next to that attendant had a bad day. And all the staff were referred to by clients as Mr. or Mrs., rarely by name. And all the clients, the residents, the whatever label you want to apply to folks, were generally called by name, frequently last name. So it set up that dichotomy of the keepers and the kept.